Hi, it's Christina with the Sisyphean Journal. Today is January 22nd, and I already covered the abortion deaths that I have for this date. One was a young woman who checked into a California hospital for a safe and legal abortion in 1972 and ended up dead. Another is a woman who, I have to give him credit, Curtis Boyd seemed to have done everything right if you were willing to grant that he meant her no harm in doing the abortion in the first place. She developed complications that are very difficult to treat, so he tried. And the third was a 1925 death attributed to prolific Chicago abortionist Dr. Lucy Hagenow. So I'll provide links to those three deaths below. So what we can do today is we can look at the kind of dishonesty that the abortion lobby resorts to in order to push forward their narrative. And this example is something that pro-lifers of my generation will remember, the notorious Koop Report. On July 30th of 1987, then President Ronald Reagan directed his Surgeon General, C. Everett Koop, to prepare a report on the effects of abortion on women. Now, pro-life and pro-choice groups disagree about what the results of that request were. Pro-life activists say that Koop never wrote a report, but instead sent a letter to Reagan saying there were no unassailable studies. Pro-choice activists say that there was a Koop report that said abortion is perfectly safe. So which side is telling the truth? Well, let's look at the inside story. It was complex, and getting to the bottom of it required many hours in Library of Congress digging through congressional record. So follow this carefully. Koop did not want to write the report for a variety of personal and professional reasons. He kept trying to beg off, but Reagan kept pushing him. So Koop foisted the task off on his staff. The research and preparations for the planned report evidently became largely the task of one George Walter. Now, Walter listed a lot of folks he consulted about research into the effects of abortion on women. Oops, fix a typo here. Superficially, it looks like Walter had a crew of mostly pro-choice researchers with token pro-life researchers that brought forth their evidence. But actually what happened is that Walter contacted the pro-choice researchers at the Centers for Disease Control, and they forwarded a list of 250 articles to him. Now, these staffers were not neutral public servants without an agenda. They were abortion cheerleaders, people for whom abortion was the answer to a multitude of sociological and public health problems, if only the practitioners could kind of work the bugs out. For example, Carl Tyler had agitated during the pre-Roe period for a federal law legalizing abortion on demand, with the full expectation that the massive surge in the number of abortions would also mean a surge in the number of maternal deaths. But he felt these deaths would be worthwhile in the long run because he thought that abortion on demand would, quote, eliminate child abuse in a single generation. So I think we've aborted something like 65 million babies, and child abuse is still a problem. So either we killed the wrong 65 million or 65 million wasn't enough. Which is it, Dr. Tyler? Hey, Tyler and his colleagues were people with an agenda. The articles they selected were 250 articles that the CDC staff had written or that their friends were written, and they painted abortion in the best possible light. Now, after this literature review, Koop felt satisfied that his staff had gone through sufficient motions to satisfy Reagan. He drafted a letter to the president concluding that there had been no unassailable studies on the long-term impact of abortion, and he hoped to wash his hands of the whole thing. So Koop directed his staff to drop the project on January 10th of 1989, hoping that Reagan would be happy with the letter and drop the subject. But George Walter proceeded to rewrite the report, submitting it to Koop on January 17th. Walter's cover letter said, "This document was reviewed and concurred with by our unofficial consulting group. It represents a balanced, well-written document which is directed to the general public. Its underpinning is scientifically sound and presents a solid, common-sense approach to this important public health problem." Not true. The report was not concurred with by many scientists studying abortion, such as Thomas Hilgers, Wanda France, Matthew Bolfrin, Leonard Arlo, and Thomas McDonald. How could it be a balanced report if there were only people from the pro-abortion side giving information? The report said things like that there were no problems such as infertility, miscarriage, and ectopic pregnancy, that they are no more frequent among women who experienced abortion than they are among the general population of women. Again, even at the time, they knew this wasn't true. So Koop instructed Walter to shelve the draft and not to release any report about abortion from his office. But instead, Walter released the draft under Koop's name. And Koop didn't even read the final report until he was brought before a congressional committee. During his testimony, he repeatedly tried to distance himself from the report with vague statements about not having read it. Now, Walter said that the bulk of consulting was done with Carol Hogue at the CDC and with Jackie Forrest of the Alan Guttmacher Institute, which is the research arm of Planned Parenthood. And to give you some perspective of how rabidly pro-abortion these people were, Carol Hogue tried to claim that abortion enhances fertility by pre-stretching the uterus like you'd stretch a balloon before you blew it up. Walter admits that he elected not to study the impact of abortion on rape or incest victims or for those aborting for fetal abnormalities. So in other words, he deliberately excluded from his study the women already known to be at highest risk for both emotional and physical sequelae. Now, Jackie Forrest told Congress, "I met with Dr. Koop and his staff members twice during the course of the review of research on the health effects of abortion. The first meeting was the initial group meeting held by Dr. Koop in the fall of 1987. The second was with other representatives of the Alan Guttmacher Institute." Again, remember, this is like asking R.J. Reynolds to talk to you about the health effects of smoking. The Alan Guttmacher Institute in the summer of 1988. In addition, I was asked to meet and consult with Dr. Koop's staff to provide more detailed information about pertinent research by the AGI and to present findings from these studies that were in process in 1977 and 1987 and 1988. She said that she wished Dr. Koop and his staff had issued the full report on their research review, and she wanted to commend them for undertaking the project in a very professional manner, which is akin to getting a glowing report of the health effects of smoking from R.J. Reynolds. Notice that Ms. Forrest lamented that Koop and his staff had not issued a full report. In speaking to Congress, she recognized that there was no officially released Koop report, merely the draft that she had helped to prepare. Now, when noted abortionist and abortion promoter Jaroslav Halka was asked to present the complications of legal abortion to the Surgeon General, he instead organized a literature review with the following question: why did the United States legalize abortions? Halka evidently never presented Koop any evidence of legal abortion complications, despite the existence of such evidence in research performed even by abortion advocates such as William Brenner and Philip Stubblefield. Clearly, Halka treated the proposed report as an opportunity to propagandize in favor of legalized abortion rather than as an opportunity to have existing research reviewed by the Surgeon General. And then touting his over 9 years in the abortion surveillance branch of the Centers for Disease Control, abortionist David Grimes claimed, "The medical evidence concerning the safety of induced abortion in the United States is clear and incontrovertible." As proof of legal abortion safety, he points to the Joint Program for the Study of Abortion, JPSA, pronounced JIPSA, which got all of its information from abortionist records. And the largest of those participating facilities was later discovered to have charted a dead patient as pink alert responsive. This gives you an idea of how accurate their data was. Now, Grimes had met with Koop to convince him that the data was indeed conclusive. Abortion is quite safe. He claimed that the risk of death from legal abortion is less than the risk of death from an injection of penicillin, and he cited as his source the 1982-83 CDC abortion surveillance summary, which never mentioned penicillin. He also asserted legal abortion has not been found to impair a woman's ability to have children in the future, citing Willard Cates, Carol Hogue, and Christopher Tietze. And first, this is incestuous citing, basing his conclusions on the biased research of some of the most avid proponents of abortion. And second, the assertion is patently false, since many acknowledged abortion complications impede future childbearing capability. And third, even Hogue et al. Admit that the effects of multiple abortions aren't even remotely known, and nearly half of all abortions are repeat abortions. Fourth, second trimester abortions have been shown to at least potentially affect future childbearing unfavorably, even if no complications are noted at the time. So we had Grimes lying 4 times in a single statement. Grimes also made the obviously blanket statement that the risk from pregnancy and childbirth is about 7 times higher than that from induced abortion. Now, at that time, it was known that by 16 weeks, abortion was at least as dangerous as childbirth and that the risks increase exponentially after 16 weeks. No blanket statements can be made comparing the risks of abortion to the risks of childbirth, even if one assumes that the data are reliable, because there is no single abortion risk to compare to a single childbirth risk. Abortion risks vary widely depending on the woman's health, the stage of pregnancy, the skill of the practitioner, and the method chosen. And childbirth risks vary as well, according to many factors, including how much prenatal care is provided. So, what did they do? They consulted with other abortion advocates. The American Public Health Association, the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, and Planned Parenthood Federation of America. Again, this is like asking tobacco growers and cigarette companies to prepare a report on the health effects of smoking. Koop and Walter met with no pro-life medical groups, despite the number of respected and reputable professionals in those groups. The few pro-life professionals consulted were treated as individuals speaking for themselves rather than as representatives of a large number of their colleagues. His input from those opposed to abortion was almost exclusively limited to religious groups. So is it any wonder his information was skewed? Koop made the ridiculous statement that obstetricians and gynecologists have long since concluded that the physical sequelae of abortion were no different from those found in women who carry pregnancy to term or who had never been pregnant. First of all, only a few obstetricians and gynecologists had concluded any such thing, notably Jaroslav Holka and David Grimes. Second of all, it's absurd on its face. Is Koop asserting that a woman who has never been pregnant, some nun in a convent, is going to spontaneously develop a uterocolonic fistula, that's a hole between her uterus and her colon, just spontaneously? That her cervix is just going to spontaneously drop off? That her empty uterus is just going to rupture all by itself? This assertion is straight from George Walter's unauthorized report, which we have already established was written by and approved by people who make absurdly broad and insupportable statements about abortion safety. Clearly, Koop's mind was muddled by his contact with these people, both on his staff and in consultation. So the Surgeon General's report, or Koop Report, on abortion is non-existent. There exists only the Koop letter and the unauthorized report prepared by George Walter in consultation with some of the most avid and enthusiastic proponents of legal abortions. Many scientists and physicians would vehemently disagree with the tone and content of the report. Therefore, any presentation of the report as respecting Koop's independent conclusions or accepted scientific knowledge are at best based on colossal ignorance and at worst a deliberate attempt to deceive. Any statements by Koop on the safety of abortion are based on what appeared to be a concerted effort by abortion advocates to turn the Surgeon General into a spokesman for their business.